Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Writers Drinking Whiskey. And this is a very special edition for me. If you've watched the show, you know I say that all the time because all of them are my kids. They're all special to me. But this one has a fun backstory, which I love, is that I was visiting Fort Bragg, which is about 2 hours north of San Francisco in California, and happened upon a local bookshop. I just wanted to support the bookshop. You know, there were some local author books there, and I picked one up. And just the guy mentioned how great of a reader Joe Smith, and actually I think I have the book here that I got from said coffee shop, mentioned that, you know, the writer was such a great reader. If you ever get a chance, you have to listen. And I was like, hey, I'm thinking about doing a podcast that I've recorded 3 of and released none of them. If Joe's interested, just have him call me. And I thought nothing would ever come of it. Well, this show's coming of it. So, and I get 2 for the price of 1 because I also got Joe's dear friend here, Larry Felson, with me. So, Joe, Larry, welcome to the bar.
Okay, I can tell you're from LA. And the reason I could tell is because you introduced Fort Bragg as being 2 hours north of San Francisco. That's 2 hours LA driving. It's like, nobody here drives that fast. It takes me about 3.5 to 4.
3.5 to 4 hours.
So there you go.
Really? I think it really took us about 2 hours. Maybe
I might did. That's one reason
I think it's probably a little longer. It could be 3 hours given the traffic. It could be
maybe 3 hours. Yeah,
right.
Maybe
2 would really be extra.
Okay, well,
Although the other way around,
yeah.
I was just down in LA, and believe me, it was going from the airport to Brentwood was about an hour and 10 minutes. So.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure when you get on the open road, you just want to, take off, right?
Yeah.
Well, maybe the scenery was so lovely, and we were actually moving. It just felt like 2 hours.
You're actually moving.
That's a good answer.
Good.
Yeah.
Awesome. So maybe we'll just start with you, Larry, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself to the audience here.
Let's see. How far back do you want me to go? I come from the Southern California. When I grew up in San Diego area, and then I ended up coming up to school at UC Berkeley, at San Francisco State, as far as all that goes, and got involved in the poetry scene in San Francisco early on, more like in the 60s or late 60s. And so I became very much involved, as a poet. There were, at the time, there was a group around, if you know the poets, Jack Gilbert and Linda Gregg, anyway. And I met many of the other luminaries of the area. And we had a poetry group that is still ongoing. In fact, Joe is now a part of it. It's sort of like, it's morphed into a, across California, at least Northern California, I should say. And at the same time, I've also been a political activist for that same period of time, coming alive in the politically active in the late 60s and onward, including to this day, although not quite the same in the same capacity. So and I've always maintained a connection to the poetry world and continue to write poetry and publish some things. And we have a Joe's book, and my book just came out like last year. And both of us have other publications before that, chapbooks and other things.
And Joe, would you mind maybe introducing yourself a little bit more, giving some background?
Well, I think my first 37 years I spent pretty much as a gypsy, here and there and everywhere, starting with the age of 0. Lived in several different foreign countries for various reasons. And then about the age of 37, I slammed into the Mendocino coast and have more or less been here for the last 37 years. Suddenly became immobile or sessile at best, right? And like Larry, I've published a few books, a couple of books here and there, and do some translating as well as writing my own stuff. And I write a lot of stories. These days, mostly stories, not so much poetry, but I do both.
Sure. That's awesome. So cool. So thanks for that, guys. So maybe then we can get to my favorite part of the show here. And what are we drinking today?
Well, there's recipes and then what we're drinking.
I know.
That's two different things.
You know,
So we're having.
Just-
Can you see this?
I can, yeah. Actually, if you held it up a little bit more, we can see the name. There we
Okay.
go.
Okay, so this is from Portugal, and it's not. It doesn't say. It's funny. It doesn't say exactly which, but it seems to me it's more like a. I don't know. It's a sweet Pinot or something like. I can't. It's probably that Pinot Noir, but a little bit sweeter than a California. It's Portuguese, and we drink a lot of wine. Long, there's a National Geographic has a very good wine club which gives you wine from all over the world. So
that's neat.
Ones to join, and the prices are not bad. So
Right.
I have other I don't know the exact recipe of this wine, however, but,
Right.
but it's pretty good, and it's we're gonna have a little right now
Okay.
in keeping with the spirit of the show, and then I do have some other recipes for other things. Like that I could share later or whatever. I don't know. I like Irish whiskey. I don't, but I only drink it straight, or maybe a little ice. I don't put anything in it. Jameson is my choice, although I've had other Bushmills and I don't know. There's another one when I was in Ireland. Is it Redbreast? Red something. There's another
Sure.
special.
That's
I
a really
remember
good one.
that. And anyway, so there's that. I also drink, as you can see, I don't know if you noticed the wording on my cap here. If you can see that.
Kill Devil rum, right?
You know where that's from?
I don't.
It's from, you know where Kitty Hawk is? North Carolina?
No, okay. I've heard of it. That's where the first one of the
Wright
first
brothers.
flights or something was, right?
That's the name of the hill. The hill actually is right there where the idea, the Kill Devil rum comes from, at least the theory is that the pirates crashed nearby the ocean, or they crashed on the rocks, should say, and they would take they had rum aboard. They would take it up and hide it up in the hills. So and then the rum was it got to be it was notorious as really strong and good. I don't know so that, and then you can still buy it there. There's
very cool.
We did have a bottle of it, and it was good. And I got the hat. It says Kill Devil Rum. So I do like rum, but I don't know. I don't put much in rum. I do put lime juice, which maybe you're not supposed to. I don't know. Otherwise, I don't really do too much to it.
Sure.
Although I'll also do the standard Cuba Libre as well.
So, yep. And so I'm going to do, so I've had it on here before. I don't know if you guys can see that. I'll try to hold it up. It's called Writer's Tears. It's actually an Irish whiskey that they age and usually an American.
Go ahead.
Yeah. It's usually American oak barrels. This one, they finish it in a Marsala cask finish is what they call it. So my brother-in-law got it. So all these bottles are either things people have recommended from the show or that it's been gifted to me. So I'm going to just sip on this today. And I have my fancy little cup they gave us in Scotland. When we did there's a place in Edinburgh that they say it's the largest private whiskey collection in the world. And you go and there's just bottles everywhere, some of which are empty because it evaporates and it just never got opened. So it's an unopened bottle that's completely empty, which seems like a terrible waste to me, but it's there. And it was always fun for me because now we have 3 of these glasses because I went with my wife and my oldest daughter, and they hate whiskey. So I got triple the experience as we went through, and it was like, here's Islay, here's all the different places. And I just got to keep, triple drinking. And now we have triple glasses here. So I'm just going to sip on this while you guys sip on your wine, and then we'll get going.
It's funny when I look at the label Writer's Tears, I said, wait a minute, I know that I've seen that. Where I've seen it was on your show. Because I've looked at a few of the with Johnson and a couple other.
Yeah.
And I said, that's what I saw.
Yeah, I think it was the
Did
I
see.
think I drank this with Matthew Kaye. I think what month would that have been? I think the March episode. So that's funny. Yeah, that's
I
where
did-
I've seen it. Yeah.
Okay, anyway.
I'm consistent, as you can see.
Yeah.
So awesome. So cheers, guys.
All right. And there we go. Click the screen. No, you can't do that.
Just slam it against the computer.
So did you
screen.
ever hear of a brandy called Germain Robin?
I don't think so.
Okay, it's two names, Germain hyphen Robin. So it's 1984, and I'm in Ukiah,
That's up here.
in the over the hill here in Mendocino. And I went to work at Hidden Cellars Winery over there in Talmadge, and somehow I ended up being the one that would crush the French Colombard grapes. Clean the tank and do all that stuff. And then the Germain Robin distillery had just opened up about 8 miles out of town with this French guy whose family was famous for making alembic brandies. I have no idea what an alembic brandy is. That's what they make. So I made the wine, and I just, and this was their first distillation. There was the bottles came out new, and not too long, like 10 years later, I totally forgot about it. 10 years later, I happened to see a television, and there was Bill Clinton, with very prominently displayed next to a bottle of Germain Robin brandy. that became the choice brandy of the White House.
Oh, wow.
During the Clinton era.
That's good to know.
They sell it up here. I don't know if they sell it down there or not. They have it at our local market. And since I don't drink that much anymore, it's kind of pricey.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Everything's kind of pricey now.
Everything is kind of, isn't that the truth?
One thing that Joe hasn't mentioned so far is that maybe he wasn't going to mention it, but that he used to be a bartender as well.
What?
True.
Absolutely.
Oh, that is
2 years.
awesome. The first bartender I've had on the show. I
As
need
well
a
as-
patron bartender to help me along here because I'm running out of recipes.
Well, I would have stayed in the bar, but the bar closed. They ran so much in the red. I'm sure I didn't help. And just to prove that America,
All those heavy pours.
right, just to prove America is downwardly mobile, I was immediately hired by the local junior college.
Yeah, then he became a professor.
So it's like, and the only difference between teaching and bartending is you don't get to drink in the classroom. And that is it's very similar.
Yeah, I can believe it. Yeah. That is fun.
And
So
just,
if
just like you really can't pour drinks down your customers' throats, I think my educational philosophy is you can't teach anybody anything either. All you can possibly do is make them hungry to learn something and give them a couple of tools to find out how to learn that thing and tell them they actually can do it if they persist. But
right.
I don't see students as being open mouths at the bar. They just pour down that whiskey knowledge.
This is true.
Well, also
This
maybe
is-
tell your stories too. I would add to that, tell stories.
Oh yeah, you can
I
always
mean-
you can always tell stories. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
very good at.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
So
but
if
I didn't mention, but if somehow I skipped over 25 years of my life, I don't know why, that I was also a teacher, 25 to 30 years. Oh yeah, it's in there.
yeah,
In
I teach
between-
for a while. Yeah.
After San Francisco, in Oakland, mostly high school.
Mostly high school. Okay. Very
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, my
And also-
older brother is a high school teacher. He's been he's probably going on 25 years, I think, at this point.
Down in LA.
So even a little further north of LA, if you've ever heard of Palmdale, Lancaster,
sure.
it's the Antelope Valley.
Sure.
Yeah, the northernmost part of
Valley.
LA counties where we lived. I mostly grew up there from about 7 on, and he's been out there.
Right.
So awesome. So if next time I'm visiting, because I'm sure we'll head up to Mendocino at some point again, where's the one place to get a drink, and what's the one thing we need to do?
The one place to get a drink is right where I'm sitting right now at Larry Felson's house.
As well.
And it's much better
We're
than any
limited.
of the bars, believe me.
Well,
It's more fun and it's cheaper
Well,
too.
if you had, which bar would you? Mendocino, the best place to go would be the barn. Would be either Dick's or near the what's the name of Patterson's.
Patterson
Patterson.
would be in Mendocino.
Spectacular Irish bar with spectacular food. It's
Okay.
there's also smaller divey type bars which are great too.
Sure.
Dick's is really good.
Right.
And here.
And there is the North Coast Brewery up here now has a
That's a big time.
a beer outlet. And
Okay.
believe it or not, pretty soon we're going to have 3 breweries in this town.
Oh, wow.
2 more. And it reminds me of I lived in Germany for a number of years, and even in this is many years ago, even in the small towns there were 3 breweries.
The other two. Well, I know one of them. The overtime. Oh, the new one that's opening.
There's one called
There's
the
one-
Overtime, which is kind of like a Zen hippie brewery.
Well,
Then there's the North Coast Brewing, which specializes in whale beers.
no, North Coast Brewery is a very big
Yeah, it's a big outfit now.
they have like several beers. It's kind of up and down the coast. I don't know if you find some down. You'll find some down in Southern California.
Yeah, you're fine.
Look.
And we're about to have a 3rd brewery open soon.
Yeah, I remember when we went to Colorado maybe 10 years ago now, and there was like 2,000 like craft breweries or something you could go to. And it's starting to like that. I don't know if it started there, but you're starting to see that in California now too. It's like you start just seeing, I was driving around our little suburban city here and saw a brewery I'd never had seen before. So it's like the 3rd one that's within 10, 15 minutes of here.
I promised to bring this up. I have a nephew who's in the midst of trying to develop a new kind of version of filtered green tea,
Oh, okay.
cold filtered green tea with a new sort of formula. I'm not sure, but it's using the finest green leaves, right?
Sure.
It's cold filtered, but there's several different green leaves you can use, both Japanese, or Chinese. So they're trying to kind of cultivate, I don't know, some there's the green leaf that's the most mellow and is sweetest and such. And then key to it is letting it brew for like over 5 or 6 hours, cold brew.
Oh, wow.
And then
Sure.
you refrigerate it. And then he's trying to find manufacture. He's actually they're having some success. And the brand is going to be called Cocoa.
Cocoa. Okay.
K-O-K-O.
Okay.
I had to bring it.
Very good. If there's a link or anything for more information, give it to me after the show, and I'll keep it with the show notes and things. We can give him a plug.
Okay. All right. Now, actually, he's got it. I've been talking too much. You have to bring out your. He's got a recipe too.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In keeping with the tea theme, since I don't drink red wine first thing in the morning, unlike our ancestors, this is my coffee cup.
Okay. Yeah, I see the snowman.
And see the snowman? It's the only one I could find that was big enough to hold the coffee in the morning that I drink. And this is an interesting story. I don't know about, I do French press coffee, and I always froth the milk. But there's something that I didn't know until a few years ago, which is I started going on walks in the middle of the night. And one night I go on a walk and I go to Safeway, which is 2.5 miles away. And while I'm there, I noticed that in their coffee section, they are selling a premium Pete's coffee, and it's on sale at a reasonable price. So I buy this coffee and I bring it home, and I'm looking forward to making it. When I get home, it's like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I have a burr grinder, all that nonsense. I do it. And when I put the beans in there, there's a little tiny pebble. Fortunately, before I turned the grinder on, I noticed that the pebble's in there. And so I picked the pebble out and I cut up that coffee bag with the UPC code, and I wrote a little letter and I sent it off to Pete's Coffee, and I told them that I was really disappointed that their quality control wasn't better, and I found a pebble in my coffee, and I was very disappointed I didn't get to drink it that night, and I was afraid there might be more pebbles in there. And I've been buying Pete's Coffee for a number of years here, and didn't hear. I mailed a letter off with the pebble attached with Scotch tape. I didn't hear anything. About 3 or 4 days later, a young woman with a very pleasant voice was at the other end of the line when I picked it up. and she was calling from Pete's Coffee. And by this time, I kind of rethought it, and I said, she said, "So we got your letter." But all you guys are walking around saying, "Who's this lunatic Mr. Pebble up there in Mendocino?" What's this guy all about? Yeah, no, we're really sorry, and we want to send you some coffee in recompense. So she did. She sent me off coffee comes in 12 ounces now. They sent me a legitimate 16-ounce pound. I got
very good.
a pound of the Pete's coffee. But here's where the crux of the recipe is. When that coffee came, I made it, and I said, "Wow, this is really good coffee." And I looked at the bag, and I saw, for the first time in my life, I ate coffee that had been roasted the day before.
Oh, wow.
Gone to the roasting room
Send you
and put in a package, and the Pete's labels their coffee, and so it came overnight, quick mail. It was there, and ever since then, you'll see me at the supermarket pouring over the bags of coffee.
The
I won't buy anything more than 6 days old.
Wow, that's good to know.
And it was. I've been drinking coffee for 70 years when this happened, practically,
right.
And it never occurred to me to check the date.
Sure. Well, now I realize I've been doing it all wrong because I go get the beans we have a Sprouts, a hop, skip, and a jump away. I go get the beans, but I don't like to run out. So then, I get beans, and they sit in the cupboard here for 2-3 weeks, no matter how long ago they were roasted. Just because I buy extra, so now I realize I need to stop buying extra, and I need to start checking these dates.
Well, you can freeze, but you can freeze them as well.
No, do not freeze coffee. I think 2 or 3 weeks. 2 or 3 weeks would be fine.
Why not freeze?
Because there's an acid which comes out of the coffee unless you're going to keep the coffee for like 2 years.
No.
Right. And if you're going to have it you're going to drink it within 2 months, don't put it in the freezer. Cool. I know. This is what the pizza people told me, right? In fact, it even says on the bag, "Do not freeze." Believe it or not. Because Americans put everything in the freezer. They put batteries in the freezer, thinking that it will keep the battery. I mean, it's true. It's not. You ever open somebody's freezer and see a bunch of D cells in there? I'm thinking, what? Do you want to imitate Minnesota, or what's the deal here? Well, anyway, I don't want to be too insistent about it, but no, I think that's fine. A cool, dry is really important. Sealed container. I think coffee will keep for a month or 6 weeks. So don't go. They don't need any more lunatics out there.
By the way,
right?
No. Is Pete's down in Southern California too?
We do, yeah.
Yeah, because it started in Berkeley, right?
Yeah.
Pete's Coffee.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, started in Berkeley. One shop in Berkeley, in a shopping area, kind of. One in the 60s is when it started.
Right.
The original Pete's.
The original Pete's?
You did too, probably.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway.
One last codicil to all this nonsense. I play ping pong at the senior center, despite the fact I can't see the ball. I do radar, and very acute hearing, kind of like a bat, And one of the ping pong players is named Dominic, and he's 92 years old, and he is still playing ping pong. So I mentioned this coffee thing to Dominic, who also really likes his coffee, and he went out and he now gets green beans over the internet and roasts them at home. And he insists, more than 12 hours, he won't drink his coffee. So there is somebody who's really over the top.
Well, that's good to know. I occasionally do things crazy like that. Like my wife's noticed I started making homemade barbecue sauce. I mean, we made homemade mayonnaise because I was making lobster rolls once, and I'm like, if I'm gonna buy lobster, I want to have nice mayonnaise like that for the lobster roll. So now my son's obsessed with it. So every week I'm making more so he can use it with sandwiches and things. So that's a man to my own heart. One day I will end up roasting my own beans just because So maybe we can rotate on here. So one of the questions I like to ask everyone that comes on, and if you've watched a couple of episodes, I'm sure you've heard me ask it, is what's a pet peeve? What's the last thing that made you irrationally lose your cool? That it doesn't need to be anything major. It could be the pebble in your coffee.
Go ahead.
I think that'll do it for me, William. I think that I read the questions and I thought about this one, and as Larry will attest, I'm sure I have various rants and peeves, probably more than I'm aware of. But the last several years, I've tried not to vent, because it doesn't strike me as being terribly useful either for me or the people around me. So and we have enough venting in our politics,
Sure.
I don't need to do it in a way. And I understand the need for it, but I'm trying to stay away from it myself. Felson.
Well, I'm helpless to say as far as this goes. I mean, I've been, in the sense that I've been, politically active for several years, and I'm still, and and I'm also, supportive and of revolutionary politics, in the sense that, in my opinion, the only thing that's going to move things forward in history is a serious and real revolution, not by just a handful and led by a revolutionary party, which there is. And in any case, so the pet peeve involved in all that, the pet peeve isn't ranting in a let's do something. I mean, a little bit of that, but it's more like the question of people, in my, again, my perspective, looking, we can all look out and see that things aren't going very well. I mean, I don't know where you're coming from politically, but it's pretty clear that there some kind of serious change has to occur, to transform the situation in the world. So, I guess my big concern is, after we've seen protests around George Floyd killing, we've seen protests around the abortion, issue, the Supreme Court decision, and lots of people come out on the street around this stuff. And to a lesser degree, we've seen protests around what's happening in Ukraine. But the issue of, again, I'm not going to go on along here, but the issue of what's happening in Ukraine, particularly the relationship between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, in the old Soviet Union, Russia, is quite serious. There's again, this is a proxy war that's going on. That's people are being killed really needlessly on both sides, but it's really an imperialist war underneath all of this that's going on, not, for territory and all the things that imperialists are doing. But the difference is, this isn't World War II. The difference is we have the nuclear threat, which is, and also, of course, the environment. So what I'm getting at is people actually need to grasp the actual seriousness of the situation, and then act accordingly, and I don't mean run out crazy and do something crazy, but right now the progressive people that I know they're in a kind of quandary, because they've got a candidate. I don't know, again, where you're coming from, but where a lot of people are not too happy with the situation. Like I have my nephew down in LA, who is a long time, serious, intelligent, he's a film writer, actually, writing a film, but who is a progressive Democrat. I mean, in a real way, he writes things and he's involved with the, higher ups and all that. And I said, but right now they're just they just got a clothespin over their nose with Biden, as Biden the candidate. And there's got to be another vision, another way forward. That's all I'm,
Sure.
that people have got to, try to think about what other ways can we go forward and take that seriously. So that's my rant, if you want.
Very good. Yeah, no, thank you for that. It does strike me sometimes when we see the candidates. Most of the time I just think, are these really the two best people? Like sometimes I worry that the whole system's just fraught with like how we even choose, who ends up being these two people on the ballot. It's you especially since when you look at just the process, like, and how it's, I don't know. I mean, you have to have a political science degree to even understand. And I don't, so I don't always understand, but it's like, you go to Iowa, you do this. And it's just, there's super delegates, there's all these things. It's almost like there's this confusion just to confound you. It's, I don't know if that's purposeful, but it does. It's like, how are you supposed to go about your day, go to work, raise your kids,
Sure.
be a functioning member of society, and then actually understand any of this to be able to vote in a real kind of intelligible way. Well, so thanks for that. And I really appreciate your stand on it, Joe, too, because when I read a study, this was a couple years back now, probably even before COVID, so maybe this was 5-6 years ago, where they had talked about venting. Because when I was growing up, mostly like 80s, right? I was born in 78, so mostly like an 80s kid, 90s when I was in high school. And the big thing was venting. Like, you just vent and you're going to feel better. Everyone like just vent all the time. And then a study came out and it actually showed that when you vent, you actually tend to feel worse. So it's not so much, I think it got misconstrued with voicing your opinion, being able to talk about something, being able to express like displeasure versus just venting for venting's sake, so I appreciate that. It's a fun question for me to ask guests on the show, because especially when I'm meeting someone the first time, usually people are pretty happy to tell you what they're unhappy about.
I think this plays very nicely into something which I'll share with you. A story and a poem. The story is, it's many years ago. I'm living in San Francisco before I moved to Mendocino. And the woman I'm living with is a fine poet and also a printer. And she's going to get a degree from Mills College in printing, but she needs a project. So we're sitting on the back porch out in the sunshine in the Mission District. And I'm thinking, what would be a good project for Teresa Whitehill is her name. She's at a Colored Horse Studio over in Ukiah is her current printing venture. Anyway, so we're sitting on the back stoop, and I've always had this vision, America being the downwardly mobile place that I mentioned that it is, so from bartender to teacher. I was always afraid that I was going to end up living in Nevada, someplace on a road that used to connect the states, but is now, the interstate has made obsolete. So those old dead motels out there in Nevada, where the swimming pool is full of tumbleweed, but there's still long-term rentals, and you stop and there's a screen door with a big rip in it. And I knew somehow I was going to end up living in one of those. And one day I was going to go, and the sun was going to be so fierce and the tumbleweed rolling past the door, I was going to yank down that window shade, and it was going to be all cracked and yellowed and nicotine stained, and it would be very depressing.
She got that picture, yeah.
Right. So I said, on that window shade in that motel where I'm going to live in Nevada someday, I'd like to have something else. Why don't we put a poem on the windows, on a window shade, and we'll do a whole series, or you could do a whole series of poems, and we'll call them the pull down poems. Just like that. And so she said, so what poem should we do? And I was thinking about it, and I decided just before I got to know Teresa, I was working in the prisons in Connecticut, of all places. And I worked with a group that was attempting to rehabilitate, guys in the joint. And they used many avenues. And one of the avenues was to try and use art. And so one time I was there with a bunch of the guys, and they took out a picture, reproduction of Guernica. And they asked the prisoners, write about, what do you see in this painting? Write about it in this work of art. And they did. So I'm there sitting with all these guys. So I said, I'm going to do it too. So I wrote something, right? So I said, I remember writing this piece about Guernica, and we're living in San Francisco. And to the best of my knowledge, my maternal grandmother was a woman of Basque descent. Her name was either Ibarolasa or Castile, and she was an orphan who went through the 1906 earthquake. Now we're sitting on the back stoop there in San Francisco. Everything is connected. And I said, why don't we, I found this, this is a reproduction of a picture of a woman who may or may not be my maternal grandmother. She died in childbirth, so it's hard to tell, right? This is, in the midst of history. So Teresa said, great idea. She went out to the avenues to a place where you could buy window shade paper. Got her some window shades. And I may need Larry's assistance here. Anyway,
you hold it up.
Yeah, so no, why don't you pull it down since you like to pull on things so much?
Come on, things.
So
Oh, that
here's
is
the window.
lovely.
So here is the window shade. So you
Uh-huh.
she silk screens my possible grandmother onto the window shade paper,
Right.
and here's the poem, Guernica. You want to hear it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah. All right.
And this is, I'm just trying to suggest this might be more useful than venting. This is, and with the same way that I'm sure that Picasso was angry when he did Guernica. I'm absolutely certain of it, right?
Sure.
On this day, the sun casts its own shadow. This day, a bull with loose eyes, a window, an empty bird, a burning wall, a breast, a torch, a daisy screaming in a fist. Lovers splinter like glass in the garden. The horse crumples into newsprint. The child wilts in the bone coffin of a mother's arms. When night falls, it feels as though the angels have summed up the confusion and concluded that light can live no longer in this air. Wolves and snow descend from lean mountains. On the smooth stones of the well, a soldier lays his rifle down. Eyes, he sings. My eyes have poisoned the waters of the fountain, and now I dare not pass this way again.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, that is lovely.
Yeah.
So vivid.
Yeah.
I especially love the moment. It was like his eyes poisoning the fountain. That's
That's
something to read when you're trying to close the window. You're trying to get some shade for sure.
That's actually, I wish I could track it down for you, William, but I can't. That is the eyes poisoning the waters of the fountain is a line from a really old Spanish folk song that I
Okay.
do not know. I remember hearing it. I don't know the name of the song, and sorry, I stole
Oh,
it.
that's fine.
And,
Very
and,
honest of you.
right, and the rest of it is all Picasso. That's what's on the picture of Guernica. It's just kind of like a topographical summary.
Sure. That's lovely. So do you have any of those hanging in the house right now, or is this?
No, that's the last one. Although if you went to Colored Horse Studio, you could look and see Teresa ended up, I put it on the wall of a bookstore, a secondhand bookstore I was working at on Valencia Street in San Francisco. And one day a fellow came in because we had it for sale for like $30. She printed like 50 of them. And this guy came in and he said, $30. And I said, well, I'll give it to you for 25. He said, it's worth hundreds. I said,
Oh, really?
yeah. So it turned out to be this guy's name is Peter Koch from Blackstone Press over in Berkeley. And he said, I'll take some. And she's got to get these things out there. So they've ended up, they got sold to like the Huntington Museum and the Stanford Museum. There's a list of where they are on her website. Colored Horse. Right.
Yeah.
You guys get any? Did you get any of the?
Oh yeah,
You
we
did. Oh,
yeah,
oh, that's good.
yeah, we got some money. They got us to
That's
get
pretty
some money.
cool.
But of course, I have a slightly different take on it. I mean, for instance, like having seen Guernica in the Prado and having seen Goya paintings, if you know the black paintings, and which are very dire, and the famous painting of the
Guys
peasant being shot,
yeah.
this paint. But those are terrible things, and the people around them, what's happening. But frankly, just to make a point about art, I mean, those things are, you could say they're venting. They're going, whatever. Probably not the right term to use, but still. But there's a certain level of provoking that goes on, and questioning that doesn't. I mean, it's an issue of and I'm not trying to talk about your personal thing but it's a question of, like, in a way, the way the media and whatnot, in a way, can be so devastating, right? What's going on, and we see it every day and stuff. It can be so devastating that you turn away from it.
Sure.
You have to turn away from it, or
Right.
But I'm saying there's And that's because there aren't any, people don't have a solution to it. They don't say this, they don't, like some of the things you were running down about the so-called democratic process and whatnot, right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, the question is, so that's why, there is a science to understanding how to transform the world, which is questionable on, a lot of people don't see that. They don't see that it's really a science to understand what happens to society. It's all chaotic. It's not like, the natural sciences or something. Well, not to say it's exactly the same, but it really is to try to understand, so that's why in these times, whereas like I even have, a poem or two that deals, that will, that's trying not to turn away,
Sure.
but the reason I'm going to be a little bit, reason I believe I can do that is because I actually do have a deep, in my opinion, a deeper understanding of this stuff, in terms of like, so how could one even talk about whether one wants to talk about the sins of the past revolutions and, whatever, which you could go into. How could you possibly see, looking out of the situation right now, that you could muster the strength, and the forces, for people to even rise up in a big way? How could you possibly look at that? Well, without, without having an in-depth understanding of this stuff, you can't just snap your fingers and say, "What's the matter with you?" No. But it's more like understanding the machinations that are going on right now in the system, where you have the people at the top having big struggle between, the ultra right wing, in my opinion, fascist agenda on one side with the kind of liberal progressives on the other side. They really don't have a solution for these things that are going on. This is the crux of the question. Can they really pull this out, the situation in the world? And, so that one hand, the answer can be, oh, no, it looks dismal. On the other hand, it's precisely because of these contradictions that are going on that the potential for transforming things exists, right? I'm not saying this is not it's going to happen and we know this is, no, I'm not saying that. There's no inevitable. That's just not the case. But there is a revolutionary strategy. There is a revolutionary leader. There is a revolutionary movement, which did not exist in the 60s and 70s, which is a big difference. So anyway, so I don't, that's why one can have hope, because it's very hard to have hope in this situation that we're in, I think, is what you're saying. It's just, so, but as I said, there is a science to it. And without sort of taking that up, and even amongst what happened on the left, and then I'm definitely going to shut up here, is that I try to, is that people have they underestimate the power of this regular people to grasp it. You say, well, you can't really bring this, you can't really talk to people about this, is just too heavy duty. No, as a matter of fact, that's being condescending about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm up here, I know this shit, and these people will never understand it. No, actually, it's not the case. And also, and this, Joe has, and probably you haven't, but having been through the 60s, I have seen, going from the 50s to the 60s, and further on, I have seen mass movements develop very, very quickly around the Vietnam War, around the Civil Rights Movement. So it's not, things can go from nothing going on to something big going on fairly quickly.
Sure.
I'm not, not automatically or anything like that, but it's partly, I think that's one of the things, having lived through that, in addition to deepening my understanding in that aspect of it, but having seen objectively that things can change radically. And then look around the world, Arab Spring, look around the world to the big protests that are going, stuff. Again, nothing is inevitable, or, they aren't exactly the same, but we can rest assured that there will be uprisings around the world, including here.
Absolutely.
Anyway, enough.
Well, so you mentioned you had some poems that speak to that. Do you have any you could read for us today?
Sure. Let's see.
You know what's on that?
Go ahead.
As Larry was speaking, there was a poem of his I heard the other day, and it had a wonderful image about electronic something or other.
Yeah, I'm not going to read it.
You can read it. What was electronic? The electronic is about the media.
Yeah.
What did you call that? The electronic
Catechism.
the electronic key. This is wonderful. I'm sure you'll appreciate this, William. He's talking about the media, television, radio, and I'm in total agreement with this myself as an electronic catechism.
I can see that.
I thought, man,
wonderful term for it.
It's just so precise in terms of how it feels so much of the time. And they expect us to give the responses,
Right.
Well, I have a few poems I was going to read, but related to what you asked, and after what I said, I guess I have to read this one. Okay. All right.
Okay.
This is called The Darkness Sings. The Darkness Sings. Blasted by the morning news, war, body counts, bombs, how you feel becomes an omen of deceit. The weight of compassion hardly matters as we drown in the rain of blood, in the morning babble and the glare from the screen. The sticky, sweet crimson turning black, splashing off the window, spurting into the heavenless blue-black air, billowing over the bodies and gutters in our throats, choking on the ruthless, relentless, intoning strut and whoop of imperial missile and mortar, the instant grave sites of stone and smoke carved on our retinas, birds and birdsong nowhere in sight or sound, only the human carnage and our agony and anger, seeking justice, not revenge, aiming at the roaring silence of the cosmos and the cosmos in the brain. The blood seeps into the earth, so loud and unheard in full light of day. Rage and tears will not stop the cataclysmic light of death. Bury the dawn, kill the sun. The world will not begin anew until millions arise and the darkness sings.
That is really powerful. So all of this started, which this lovely is partially why I love doing this show, is all of it started off like a simple, almost silly question I ask people about pet peeves, right? Because I don't think any of that is venting, right? I think it's a much more powerful, profound statement you're making there versus just I'm angry about traffic or the pebble in my coffee, right? It's a very different scenario. So that was a heavy poem. Thank you for that.
Yeah, well, both of us have a variety of different kind of poems, by the way. So
sure.
But Joe, why don't you read one of your gems?
Well, let's do something that has to do with the coffee. You just brought up the pebble, okay?
Right.
The coffee. Aside from the Guernica poem, all the stuff I might read today is from things I wrote during the pandemic.
Okay.
A daily poetic journal. So this is the poem for June the 12th, 2020. And I guess we all went through the pandemic together. Title of the poem is Li Jin, Chinese name, Li Jin. 4 months into the pandemic, I wake to a morning in San Francisco, half a century ago. The sun pouring its treasure through windows of a railroad flat above a Chinese noodle company. In the kitchen at the end of the hallway, Li Jin turned the crank of a hot coffee mill. Ink on the rental contract we signed with the landlord the night before was hardly dry when I attached the mill to a wall stud. Don't, she said, handing me a freshly brewed cup in bed. Get your hopes up too high. This won't happen every morning. Today's special. On this, our first day in a new home, nightingales clutched notched leafy branches in the bamboo pattern on her kimono. Coffee never tastes richer than cups from beans ground in that coffee mill. A pigtailed Dutch girl, the azure of a flawless April sky, stood in wooden shoes on the white porcelain of its square belly. Unwatered hydrangeas crowd the vase beside my automatic grinder. Poor flowers, I hear Li Jin lament, as if she were still resident in the sunlit world of hydrangeas and cloisonne. When did you wither into brittle ghosts of yourselves?
Thank you for that.
Great piece.
This is, and I've said this, and if you guys have watched the shows, I always geek out. I really love hearing writers read their own words, and I really appreciate that the way both of you read your work is really powerful. You get, as I'm sure you guys know, you get a varying you get writers that are really wonderful at reading their work, really or almost actors in the performance aspect of it. And then you get people that are terrified to, like they dread reading their work. So it's lovely listening to both of you. So I do like to ask some writing questions, but maybe Larry, if you have one more poem you'd like to read for us, and then we can get into some writing chat.
Okay, I'll just, this is a more recent one. This is title is The Birds Falling from the Sky. And there's a quotation from it from a recent movie called All That Breathes. I don't know if you've seen it. It's about these two guys in New Delhi who save birds, who save black kites. Yeah. Anyway,
I haven't seen it.
Yeah. Well, it's a wonderful film. I think I don't know if it won, but it was nominated for the Academy Award. Not that it makes any difference. The quotation is, "Life itself is kinship. We all share a community of air. The birds falling from the sky have nowhere to land. The ocean full of blood and tears, the earth scorched, flooded, and frozen. The birds feel nothing but heat, wind, and rain. The light shining through their feathers is not beautiful to them. To the birds, light is just life. They see gulls, cormorants, pelicans, clouds, stars, and beyond. They see spirit in everything. They hear the sky singing. They live in the wind and water and trees. They have sand and cliffs. They have no names for each other, no vision of the future, no memory of the past. They fear storms and us. Morning flows into evening, sunrise into moonlight. As the sun goes down, as the moon goes down in the midnight ocean, they head for the shore. To the birds, not tortured by beauty and death, it is just nightfall."
I'd like to answer with a really quick poem that jumped into my head this morning.
Good.
And this is, I really do believe everything is connected. This is had to do with Larry, the poem Larry just read. Sunrise. Today. Done up and gone yesterday. Who are these birds cheering on the sun? Up and gone yesterday, up and gone today.
Yeah, and that was lovely. I really loved the line, Larry. And I don't mean to butcher it, but because you just said it and I didn't memorize it. But the notion of the birds going to shore and not fearing death. It was right towards the end.
Yeah.
Yes, not tortured by it. That was the part. Yeah, that was
Beauty and
really
blood,
lovely.
just nightfall. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think Joe
Yeah.
helped with the line.
For any of the people out there that may want to start writing poetry, or maybe have started and not very far along, is there any advice you guys would share with them?
Check the date on your bags of coffee beans.
This is basically a long advertisement for Pete's. I'm going to reach out. If you could have that nice lady call me and say if she wants to promote the show, we'll put a Pete's logo up here.
This was some years ago, unfortunately. She may not still be there. I don't know. I mean, I think that everybody writes in such a unique fashion that it's really hard. I don't think I have any advice other than keep at it. What do you think, Larry?
Well, I mean, it's hard to put things in a nutshell, kind of like, I mean, not that you have too, but I've taught creative writing and I've taught poetry and, I mean, it's one thing to, over a period of time, to develop relationships with students and whatnot. But as far as, I mean, I don't know, it's hard to, I would just, I mean, for me, it's always been, let it fly. Let it fly and let the chips fall where they may, and don't throw it away as you're writing it. Just keep at it, and don't the critical eye can come into play or not, at some point. But it's particularly, I think, starting out. I mean, people tend to want to think that they have to write a certain way or and whatnot. And I think you got to throw all that out. That there really aren't. Just forget that there's rules. Forget that there's the right way to do something. Not that, of course, a lot of people will say, "Well, I don't have the right way to do anything." And that's a good place to start.
Excellent place to start.
Good place to start, and not end either. I mean,
I think Larry's right about it, because I think that the craft will come if you keep at it. I think as he was speaking, it struck me that there's a line, I believe it's in Sir Philip Sidney, Astrophil and Stella, where he's saying, "How can I impress Stella?" And basically the poet answers this question by saying, "Look into your heart and write." And I think I think everybody has their biases. And one of my pet peeves with a lot of modern poetry is it's too much in the head and not enough in the heart. Look into your heart and write. Doesn't mean you leave the head out of it. Don't misunderstand me, right? It's just, let's not play with words. What is important to us? What is a poem? It's not like, should I write a poem today? The poem, that poem that has to be written, do it.
Absolutely. I often think about that, because I think especially for writers have lots of ideas, right? You can have lots of poems, lots of novels, short stories, whatever it might be. I have a list. I already know that there's hundreds on that list I'll probably never get to, but I always focus what's the one that feels vital to me. Like, what's the one I feel like I can't move on my day if I don't spend some time working on that.
That's exactly what I was trying to say. That's it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, as someone who knows that having given my sort of political bent, it's quite dangerous to be. I mean, this is not a rule, but it's to be to idea kind of driven. I mean, in other words, generally when I have an idea that I'm going to follow in a poem, it doesn't usually do well. I mean, I'm just saying I'm better when I don't know what I'm doing.
Sure.
Okay. I mean, I'm not saying I don't, I
guess what you mean.
But nor do I think it's only spontaneity and only inspiration. But there is an element, though, that it's. I mean, look, there are plenty of poets out there who write far more consciously, conceptually than I do. In the sense, So I don't. I think there's a certain. Again, I guess it's sort of a cliche, different strokes for different folks, but there is, particularly with poetry. I mean, I think it's for sure when people are starting out, they just, you need to encourage them to just let it go, and you're right, the craft will come, and the other thing related to that is if you really want to write, just like you write more fiction, I believe, if you got to read what's out there. You got to see what's out there. To me, you got to, if you're writing, even somebody who's really, quote, talented or with words and all that, and what you're writing is, stuff that's, it's like a musician. If you're trying to write like Mozart, right, and you love Mozart and you imitate Mozart, it's very unlikely that you but the same is true with writing. You can't, redo what's done before. It's difficult, it's difficult to be original and all of that, but frankly, you can't, I don't know. It's contradictory because the more you have to, at the same time, you have to become familiar with the language of the times. There's, I mean, in other words, it's an osmotic effect, you know what I mean? You're reading and writing, but if you're kind of way removed from the culture, I don't know. People could argue with me about this. I don't know.
I hope so, and they probably will.
I mean, you can't. You don't want to just be, do what's done before. And if somebody tells you, wait a minute, that looks like, you're imitating. So, on the other hand, part of writing is imitation. You are imitating. You are filled with, that's part of how you develop as a writer, You can, I mean,
Sure.
how many of us as writers have been totally overwhelmed by Rilke and have not been writing like Rilke? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not that we could go on about different people, or Keats, or some of the people like that. That you end up. However, there's a certain growth thing that goes on when you go in, when it comes out of yourself and not out of somebody else.
Yeah, but I think it's a valid point. I tend to think of it like a baker or a chef, right? It's, you could try to create some completely new, utterly fantastic recipe that no one's ever tasted anything like before, and therefore don't have a palate for and will never like. But you need to kind of know basic chef, right?
Yeah,
basic
okay.
dishes, and then you get creative and you start doing things with it. So I think that's kind of the reading is, you want to have your own voice. You want to make express yourself in a uniquely way, but it's hard to do that if you don't have any
and then
any basic recipes that you can kind of build off of.
Of course, in this case, and the cliche really, in this case, no matter what your intention, no matter what your, whether you answered on the thing that you just raised, the proof is in the pudding. It is. Right? I mean, I would say myself, I lean toward towards not having the recipe, whatever.
Sure.
But anyway, yeah. On the other hand, you got to come out with burnt cookies and tasteless stuff, and you can say, yeah, well, I did. It's different. Yeah. Well,
right. Yeah.
Nobody can eat it.
Right. And not to butcher the metaphor, but yes, like if you don't even know how to use the oven, right? Like, you don't know how to use the tools at your disposal.
Well, I agree.
It's going to be hard to get somewhere.
Yeah, and then you deny it and say, well, I don't know. I turned it on. I thought it was okay. I mean, in other words, that's the metaphor is, it's well taken. I think you're right.
Sure. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, man. It's been really lovely getting some time to chat with you guys. Next time I'm up, I'm planning a trip to the Felson porch.
Okay. Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. So
come up this way.
Yeah, we will. Oh, we like to travel up, occasionally. I mean, it's for people that don't know, right? People think of California, and a lot of times they just think of like LA, or they think of San Francisco, like they've seen in the show. But like where I am is very dry, very crowded. Where you guys are is very green and not crowded, right? And it's super beautiful up there. So we love to get up there when we can to kind of just get a change of scenery, a change of pace. Although apparently we're still driving way too fast. But
I'll be in Greece for 3 weeks, starting June, for 3 weeks, and then I'll be back. So during the summertime.
Sure. Yeah. If next time we head up, I'll definitely hit you guys up. Maybe we can get together for a drink in person. That'd be wonderful. To end every show, getting back to just the human side of things. So I just like to ask, like, if there was one piece of advice, life hack, call it whatever you want. One thing you wanted to say to anyone watching the show, when it premieres here, what would that be?
I had something written down and I've forgotten what it was. But just don't forget what you're trying to say. One piece of advice. What was it?
Keep track of your notes.
Keep track of your notes. It may have something to do with that venting, which has been on my mind in a way, which is don't let your buttons get pushed. When you feel that finger on your button, remember, you don't have to let that button go down, right?
Sure.
That finger, unless you allow it to, that finger does not have the power to really push the button.
Right.
It's only with your permission.
Yeah.
On some level.
Sure. No, that makes a ton of sense because my our youngest son is 12, and he was so he's in junior high, and junior high is just super awkward time, like most of our lives. And he was saying someone did something. It was some minor thing, right? Just minor junior high kid thing. But someone did something that got him really angry. And he's he always does that. I'm like, yeah, but who's in control of your emotions? Like, are you letting him? Like, if you're going to let him push the button on you, then he's always in control. Or are you going to be the one that's in control of that? So it's sometimes easier said than done.
It is
and
easier
there's-
said than done, but I think that's
Sure.
great
It's
advice
a
to
great-
give a kid, I think.
Yeah,
Well-
beautiful.
And then what I would say is this is based on a little discussion that Joe and I just had about something else. But this is kind of as much Joe's as mine, but compassion is the key.
And no, I think that's lovely. I think it goes. I think it maybe gets undersaid nowadays. Being kind, being compassionate to everyone else, like how far that can take society if that's an actual fundamental thing we do. So
Yeah,
Thank you
like
for
Larry's
that.
saying that, like for your son, understand the pain behind that person putting his finger on your button. Pain that compels him to do that.
well, thanks again so much, guys. If there someone does want to like get a hold of you guys or find more of your work, is there a place we should direct them to?
Yeah, actually, there's a
Website.
yeah. They could find or order copies of work that Larry and I have done from Gallery Bookshop in Mendocino.
Okay, very good.
Here's
And
This is Don.
they- right, they have as far as I know, Larry will correct me if I'm wrong, I believe their website is gallerybookshop.com.
Okay,
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also we do have a website that's just developing, but you can actually go there to its belindapointpress.com.
beautiful. And I'll include if you want to shoot an email with the links to me,
I can
I'll
do that.
put it on with the description and the show notes and everything. So
Yeah, I can do that.
anyone watching can go right on there and click on it and get you guys to work. So thanks again so much. I'm honored you guys came on. This was super fun for me.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. It worked out really well. Thank you. All right. Here's to you. Here's to your show.
all right. Yeah. Thanks so much again.
Jealous.
Cheers.